them? Does it help them know God better? Speak out. I promise you, you won't get it right every time. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to say things that you didn't know that you're going to say, right? But if you're doing it in faith and you're trusting that God will use you in that moment, he will not fail you. He will be faithful. And when we step out in this spiritual gift, the prophetic, we are making this body of believers, this church, this space better. It helps us all know God's voice in a more intimate way. I want to just, one practical way in my life this has happened. We just recently changed jobs. We were at a church for 7 years and 8 years before that. And many, many times over the last 7 years, there were people in our lives, people we didn't know, and some we did, that shared prophetic words over our life. And they did not make sense in the moment, just being honest. They were encouraging in my spirit, but I didn't understand why they were sharing that very thing. But when God opened the opportunity to come to Journey, all of those prophetic moments lined up. And it was like we could see it. It was almost like a puzzle where everything was sort of out of order. And once we kind of shifted our perspective, it all just came into alignment, and you could see right through it. It was, and I went back, and I just want to encourage you, if someone shared a word for you in your life, when God comes faithful on that word, go back and encourage that person if you can. I messaged every person that had shared that word over 6 or 7 years, and I said, I just want you to know that God has confirmed that. God's confirmed that. Because here's what that does. That now builds faith, and it helps that person desire even greater gifts. Even greater gifts. And if you can picture with me, I'm not going to dry up because of time, but as you discover your gifts and you dedicate them to God, if you can kind of just picture a circle with me, as you desire or you discover your gifts and you dedicate them to God, you start developing, deploying them. What that creates is a greater desire in you and for you to lead others now in discovering their gifts, developing their gifts. It's not just about you anymore. Now it's about who are you discipling, who are you bringing along with you. And that's how we use our spiritual gifts. So this is the cycle of discipleship. It's all based in our gifts. So I apologize back there for going so fast, but we got a little delayed. But I just want to encourage you to step out in your spiritual gifts, use them in a new way. And if there's nothing else that you move on from today, I want you to, even today, ask the Holy Spirit, take just one moment. It does not have to be complicated. God, give me a word that I can encourage in someone else's life today. And step out in faith and see what God does. He'll speak through you. He will. So we have just 5 minutes for questions, and we have the next thing. So I want to take that time, and if there's 2 or 3 questions that we can touch on, I want to make sure we do that. But I hope you leave encouraged today that God has spiritual gifts in your life, and you can use them. So are there any quick questions before we wrap that we could just touch on? Yeah.
For example, a person starts speaking in tongues,
Yep.
from when he was a child, and he questions if he didn't learn from others,
Yes. Great question.
listening by them,
So just to restate the question, someone's speaking in tongues, which is a gift from the Holy Spirit, right? It's in the Assemblies of God, we believe that is the initial physical evidence that the Holy Spirit is active, the baptism of the Holy Spirit in your life, right? But your question is, how do you know that that's the Holy Spirit? It's a great question. What I would say is this. God is gracious and kind, and if your heart is in the place of, I believe, God, that this is a gift that you want to give me, and I'm stepping out in faith to use this supernatural language, this Holy Spirit. God is a good God and a good Father, and He's gonna touch that with grace and pull you closer and allow you to use that language. And whether it's you heard something or not, God will then the Holy Spirit will now allow that language to develop in your own life, in that person's life. Even if it's starting with, I think maybe I heard this, It's okay. That's about just stepping out in faith and believing that this is unique for me. I do believe that there are people that, they're just trying to copy someone, but I just believe the more you step out in faith, God will then bless that, and will gift that person with their own language as they step out in faith in it. And by the way, don't be discouraged if that's not a gift in your life. I'm sure my wife would be fine with me sharing this. She was in ministry. She grew up in ministry. It wasn't until she was in her 30s, and she was ashamed about that she had not been baptized in the Holy Spirit in that way. And she was at an event at her church. Everyone had left, and her friend just prayed for her, and she was baptized there. And she was on staff at a church. I think there can be a lot of shame that is poured out on people about that, and sometimes unintentional, but just step out in faith and see what God does. So maybe one more question, and then we can wrap. What's that? For sure, yes, for sure. It's not just one. And I don't know. I don't know. I don't know that there's really ever a limit necessarily. The way I would describe it is all spiritual gifts are available to everyone who's a follower of Jesus. Some spiritual gifts are going to be active at a much greater level in your life, but all are available to you, and God uses people in that way. Yes. Great question. I don't think He will ever remove it from you. I think it's about our receptiveness. Again, remember, it's a gift, not a reward. So He's given it to you. Once it's in your life, I believe it's active in your life as much as you have faith that you believe God is using that gift in your life. I don't think He will punish you, if that makes sense, and remove that from you. It may be dormant for a time, but I believe that it is still there. Yes, they can. If I can just go there for you. I don't believe that there's anything in this world that is 100% perfectly holy and good and all that. So there's always a little sin in everything. I also believe that there's nothing in this world that's 100% sinful because God made it. So I believe that there are elements of God is working at the thing that you can imagine right now is the farthest thing from God. I still believe God is in some of that because He created it. He created the human being that did that. So that He's in there somewhere, right? It's just very dormant. So does that make sense? Just kind of how those things can. So it's something over here. It's not perfect, but over here it's not completely gone from God. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yes. So great question. So some prophetic can be warning, absolutely. The prophetic, and we don't have a lot of time to break this down, but the prophetic will always, I used that word edify earlier, it will always edify. In other words, it will always instruct or improve. In fact, the prophetic that you and I will operate in, you're not going to be most likely an Old Testament prophet that's going to come and say all these terrible things are going to happen. The gift of prophecy in your life is going to always encourage, inspire, edify, instruct, improve in someone else's life. That it will always do that. Now, there are gifts of knowledge and wisdom and things like that God may give you, if you have that gift, something that there's nothing, you now know this, and there's no possible way for you to know it other than the Holy Spirit in your life. Sometimes the gift of knowledge can sometimes be not good knowledge into someone's life. But it will always encourage them to move closer to Jesus, always. Does that make sense? So it won't be negative in that way. It may be truth, but it's not negative. Yes, it can. Absolutely. Yeah. So, yes, it can. Thank you. We need to wrap because the next one is in 90 seconds. Awesome questions. Thanks, everybody. We can chat more.